Hi. Yeah, just give me a second. Okay, I prepared a little bit of a presentation as well. And let's see. Are you able to see my slides? And I hope you can read my paper. But all right. So first of all, I would like to thank all of you for being here. Thank you to the organizers. This is my first time presenting something about my master's thesis and my personal work. And I feel very empowered and safe. I feel like this is a brave space. So thank you all for being here. And so, as I said, my name is Stefania. I am a second year master's student in the Latin American Studies Department here at UT. My presentation is titled Dystopian Realities, Queer and Undocumented Activism in Oregon. Um, the idea to collect stories and testimonies from queer activists for this project was materialized after my trip with the Oregon DACA Coalition and Causa, which are two immigrant justice groups in Oregon. We traveled to Washington, D.C. to advocate for the Clean Dream Act campaign back in 2017. While sitting in U.S. senators' offices, uh, sorry, where's my slide? While sitting in US senators' offices, I was surrounded by dozens of individuals just like me, undocumented and unafraid. In storytelling circles, similar stories of migration, trauma, and resilience were shared. I felt the importance of our collective memory and healing. I wanted to collect the stories of survival, resilience. It was important to center the queer voices in the movement, as those were often lost in issues of migration. So why Oregon? Using Oregon as a study case, in my thesis, I explored and answered three fundamental questions. How does geography affect the understanding of political activism? How are gender and sexuality overlooked from the political project in the name of advancing the common unifier, which is migration? And finally, how do, how do queer undocumented folks negotiate visibility and belonging in these spaces? Oregon serves as a rich site of research for its long history of Latinx migration and settlement. Oregon's history, being born from the idea of a white supremacist utopian land, has evolved demographically. Today, 13% of the Oregon population is Hispanic or Latino identifying individuals. With a growing number of Latino immigrants, Oregon is positioned to be an important site for migration studies, though it is hard to estimate what percentage of Latinx identifying individuals also identify as queer. The study for undocumented and queer activism remains an understudied phenomenon. My project extends the already long and existing academic literature on undocumented activism while questioning the lack of representation of queer issues within activist groups in the state. The relevance of taking the study to an underrepresented region for the study of Latinx undocumented and queer folks is to work against the monopolized stories of being undocumented in the southwest border and position this understudied group within the ongoing immigration dialogue. I argue that it's no longer enough to study underrepresented groups. The conversation of visibility and representation has been an ongoing one. It is time to look past it and rethink the literature that exists and begin to challenge it and delve deeper into the stories beyond the southern border. Um, Based on my methods, you'll see my picture here because obviously I cannot show you the pictures of the people I interview. But as this project was primarily developed during the COVID-19 pandemic, there was limitations to the study. Concerns whether field research would even be possible due to travel restrictions. I managed to return to Oregon and spend 7 months there. Methodologically, this is an oral history project. To recover queer voices in the movement, I chose to interview folks who identified themselves as queer and undocumented. The criteria for being interviewed for this research project were that the participants identified both as queer and undocumented, live in the state of Oregon, had been involved in activist organizations, and all meetings were conducted over Zoom. Composed of 38 questions, the interviews were between 1 and 2 hours long. In total, I collected 9 interviews, 3 of which did not meet the criteria but were informative in understanding organizing strategies. Um, and so my context. When I first asked participants during our meetings to reflect on a resource that helped them navigate life in Oregon, they were immediately drawn to talk about community resources. A common resource participants had struggled to access was housing. In Highlighting housing accessibility as an issue within the undocumented community is not an aim to identify how rental companies ask for social security numbers and background checks, but rather understand how folks find loopholes in community support to access one of the most basic resources, housing. Um, as a place study, it was important for me that my research asked how living in Oregon, a place that not many folks can even identify on a map, affected motives or activist involvement. I asked participants to identify resources they had had access to that helped them navigate life in such a wide space and distance from large Latinx communities. All, of my all my participants understood community as the most important source of resources. Um, for my example, I turned to Angel, who was one of my participants. They are a community organizer and identified the Student Cooperative Association as an important community resource. For this presentation, again, I turned my attention to Angel's experience with housing resources in Eugene specifically. Angel identified the Student Cooperative Association as an important community resource due to its flexible application process and commitment to housing affordability for students. The SCA was a resource I also benefited from, and I will share a little bit of my story with you all a little bit later. The Student Cooperative Association, or the SCA, is composed of three houses: the Lorax, the Campbell Club, and the Janet Smith Grad House. So this is the Lorax that looks like a little castle, the Campbell Club, and the Janet Smith. Um, all three houses are located on Alder Street, right across from the University of Oregon's campus. These houses have a long history of offering support to students, and in more recent years have worked to be more involved in community activism. The Campbell Club aspires to be a community of anarchists. The Janet Smith offers housing to graduate students and non-traditional undergraduates. The Lorax, where Angel lived, closely works with Cascadia Tree Defenders, lends its kitchen to the Burrito Brigade, and hosts other art and cultural monthly events, including dances, and to fundraise to help lower the cost of living for the house members. After moving to Oregon with their family, Angel spent some time trying to move out as they felt that home was not a supportive environment for them. Moving out meant finding a job to support themselves and pay for living expenses. While looking for housing, they found important community resources targeted specifically for students through the Students Cooperative Association, or SCA. Because the SCA is run and owned by students, tenancy contracts can be tailored to meet the specific needs of the population. For Angel, the SCA's flexibility allowed them not only to move out of their mom's place, but made it so that they could pay rent by helping advertise the SCA and increase the membership numbers of the organization as a work trader. During their time at the Lorax as a work trader, Angel was able to establish their independence from their family while going to school. The SCA does not require a social security number to be a member of the community. Rather, they look for folks who are interested in contributing to making their house a community space, folks who are aware of social issues. In talking about the SCA, a community resource which Angel and I benefited from, I am not only to identify how the SCA was supportive of Angel's transition into adulthood and supported me as I worked my way through college. Angel lived at the Lorax, a house primarily composed of undergraduate students, while I lived at the Janet Smith, a house with a majority of graduate students. Living in a house with graduate queers of color showed me how I could too go to graduate school, an important resource for a first generation undocumented queer person of color living in Oregon. I think of Janet Smith as the first home I ever truly belonged to. The SAA supported me by breaking my moving fees into installments. I was given a fully furnished room. The dogs I have two dogs, were admitted, and dinner was always served at 7 p.m. sharp. During my time here, learning about consensus making practice, gardening, nonviolent communication, I learned to live in community and not just with housemates. I would argue that the Janet Smith serves as a queer utopia where we, as a group, imagine a different possibility of how we could live and coexist with each other. And um, this is the Janet Smith, and we had a community garden in the back. We assigned job a job wheel where everybody had like a purpose and felt like we all were working towards making community, which is like a super important resource when you're trying to find people who care and who will support you. So that's all for me. Thank you all so much. And let me know if you have any questions.